Storytelling. It's in our blood. It brings us hunters together. In this age of video, there's nothing left for the imagination. It's time to give back to our heritage and share the stories of the hunt. Hello, this is Nathan Nelson, and I wanted to share with you the story of the very first buck that I ever killed. Hunting has always been a very special part of the relationship that I have with my dad. He took me out from the time that I was just a youngster, just to tag along with him in the woods and experience the hunts with him, all the way up until the time when I was able to be in the woods myself and hunt. And so it was through my dad that I ended up getting a lot of my passion for hunting. By the time I was 12 years old, I finally had my opportunity to hunt. In Wisconsin, the regulations at the time were that you had to be 12 years old to hunt. Now they don't even have any sort of age restriction, but I was able to get out that year, and I had a very successful year. Even in my first season, I was holding out for a buck that had a decent set of antlers on it. I passed up a number of bucks that were spikes and forks, and I wanted to get something that was probably an 8-pointer or bigger. That was what I was shooting for. I can remember the day just as if it was yesterday, sitting up in a deer stand with my dad, and he whispered to me, "There's a buck coming from right behind us." And he knew that it was one that I was going to try to kill. So I got situated. This thing stepped out about 20 yards right out in front of me, and I just drew back right on it, put the pin on him, touched off, and the shot ended up being a little bit back. It wasn't gut shot, but it was back. It was more like a liver hit. We gave it a little bit of time. We backed out, pulled out. The blood was that dark red color. But eventually we got on the track and started following this deer, and he took us down into the river bottom. We were having such a hard time figuring out where this deer was going, and we had several different people there, my uncle, my dad, myself, and I'm not sure, we may have had another person or two there with us to try to recover this deer. And we covered a lot of ground. We probably covered 3/4 of a mile, if not more. And finally we couldn't figure out where this thing was, and so we backed out, and that night, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I cried myself to sleep. It was a very sad experience for me as a 12-year-old on my very first buck, to wound an animal and not be able to recover it. And so I was pretty sad. And I remember that next day I went out hunting again, and we're sitting out in a different stand, and all of a sudden at my uncle's house I can hear a car horn beeping, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? And this is before the days of cell phones, of course. So I'm sitting up there like, wonder why they keep honking. And eventually I saw my Aunt Sharon coming out, and she was walking out to the tower stand and that I was sitting in. And so I got out of the tower stand and walked over to her, and sure enough, she tells me that the neighbors went out because they had found out that we couldn't recover this buck, and they had found this deer. So I was instantly jacked up. Such a cool thing to have the neighbors go out like that, looking out for me and help me find this deer. So we headed over to go get the deer, and we ended up bringing a good friend of ours, Pete Peters. Once we got up to the deer, he snapped a few pictures with one of those old box cameras, that you used to wind them up and had to turn in the film to Walmart so you could get your pictures later on. And yeah, just good memories, And nowadays we just pull out our phone and snap a few pictures, but back then it was a little bit bigger deal to do the whole photography thing. I was pretty excited when we found this deer, and I was also very thankful that the neighbors had gone out to search their land to find this deer. And sure enough, it was about, I'd say, a 1/4 mile away from where we had last left off on the track. Once we got the deer home, my mom busted out the old video camera, and she got some footage with me and the deer.
Well, here we have the buck slayer, Nathan Laverne Nelson. His first deer. He's passed up a bunch of other deer earlier in the season, and he comes up with this 8-point buck, and we'll be telling you the whole story in just a little bit.
Nate, is it worth passing up those spikes and that 5-pointer? And
How does it feel, Nathan?
Cool.
Oh.
We didn't find this.
You and Dad got this together. You did the shooting, but you and Dad were together in your tower stand down at Uncle Doug's land, hey?
Yep.
Nate did a good job. Pete Peters said there's a lot of adults that aren't as cool as Nate was under fire to make the shot he made on this deer.
Yep.
Probably a sign of things to come. He'll probably shoot a lot of big bucks in his life.
Hey, good job, Nate.
He ended up taping out right at about 95 inches. But if you take a look at the mount that we have here, there's an antler tine sticking out of the base. And you've probably been wondering this whole time why that is there. When we were dragging this deer out of the woods, we ended up noticing that there was this thing sticking out of his forehead, like right up underneath his scalp. And we pulled it out, and it was a busted off tine from another deer. So he must have gotten into a fight, and then a tine got wedged up in there, and then it somehow busted it off. I don't know how that's possible. He must have had one heck of a headache after that one. So as kind of an ongoing joke, we would say that this deer scored 100 inches because there was that extra tine there. We ended up weighing him at 187 pounds. Incredible big body deers. To this day, it's one of the biggest deer that I've ever killed body-wise. Now, unfortunately, it had been sitting there so long, the temperatures weren't ideal conditions for that deer to be laying there, and so the meat was spoiled. One of the things that we kept as part of the story of this hunt is actually the arrow that I used to kill this deer with. And this is back in the day of the old aluminum arrows. This was an Easton Game Getter. Little muzzy broadhead that I had on it here, 100 grain muzzy. And I don't even know what kind of fletchings these are called, but that was the setup. And I also had an old bow that I actually have here with me. Just a 40-pound setup. I mean, the arrow, when you'd shoot that thing, it'd be like, blew. But it worked. It did the job. So this is the deer that started it all. My passion for hunting was solidified in this moment right here, getting this deer. And I haven't looked back ever since. I'm now 17 years into this, and I'm just thankful that I have a family that got me out in the woods and gave me opportunities to hunt on their properties. My uncle let me, be out on his land and get this deer, and I'm just really thankful for all of that, because that's part of what's made me the hunter that I am today.